Think Viking ships were just wood and nails? Wrong. They were living machines designed to flex, breathe, and conquer waves that snap steel ships in half. These are 1,000-year-old engineering secrets modern designers are still copying. Don't look away. What you just heard wasn't an exaggeration. This is a masterclass in brutal, practical engineering. These weren't crude boats, they were the apex predators of the ocean, built by masters who understood physics by feel. So how did they build a ship that could flex through storms and conquer rivers only 3 feet deep? It wasn't one single trick. It was a complete system of genius. And that system starts with the impossible challenge of the North Atlantic. Picture this. 30 hard, hungry Vikings pushing a 60-foot wooden longship into black water, 1,000 miles of North Atlantic ahead, 0 GPS, 0 radar, 0 rescue. Just oak planks, iron nails, a square sail, and skills burned into muscle memory. The first wave hits like a truck. The hull shivers not from weakness, but by design. It flexes, rolls, and snaps back. That tiny wobble is the difference between a folktale and a funeral. Want to know the trick that let them ride water that breaks steel? Stick with this, because the next minutes will change how you see every boat that's ever punched through a wave. Start with the skin. Modern boats are smooth shells, great for speed, terrible at sharing stress. The Vikings refused to make the ocean play by their rules. They built lapstrake, also called clinker. Each plank overlaps the one below it by a few centimeters, fastened with clinched iron rivets and small square rows that bite and hold. That overlap is not decoration, it's a living hinge. Under a big swell, the seams flex just enough to spread the load across the hull. Too tight and the boat turns brittle, too loose and it leaks. Archaeology from ships like the Gokstad and Oseberg finds shows careful rivet spacing, about a handspan apart, not random hammering, but intentional geometry to manage stress. Imagine a chain of springs hidden under tar, simple materials, brutal environment, elegant result. This flexible, spring-like hull wasn't just a clever design, its success depended entirely on the specific materials chosen and how they were prepared. Now zoom in with your eyes. See the grain of each oak plank? Shipwrights didn't just saw wood, they read it. They split planks to follow the grain, keeping fibers long and strong, then seasoned them until the moisture content sat in a sweet zone, not soggy, not glass dry. That is why, when the bow slams a cold wave, the plank bends and sighs instead of cracking like a dinner plate. Quick check for the curious in the comments. If you've ever bent green wood versus dry wood, you know that feeling in your hands. The Vikings bet their lives on that tiny difference. But the shell is only half the trick. The spine matters. The keel, the backbone, was cut from a single oak with a natural curve baked in by decades of wind and snow. They didn't prefer straight trees. They hunted for the right curve, because the ocean is never straight. The keel's gentle sweep helps the bow rise over chop and keeps the stern planted so the steering oar can bite. Think of the keel as a track in the water. Too deep, and you're stuck in rivers. Too shallow, and you skid sideways. Viking keels thread the needle. Draft on warships could be under a meter 3 feet, yet they still tracked and turned in hostile water. That balance is not luck, it's load paths, leverage, and craft wisdom passed hand to hand. This balance of craft and leverage was most obvious in how the ship was actually controlled, connecting the helmsman's hand directly to that powerful spine. Here's the part that makes naval architects grin. The keel didn't just hold the boat together, it connected the helmsman's hand to the sea. The steering oar mounted on the starboard side, yes, that's where starboard comes from, steerboard, was tied into the keel structure so force didn't rip fittings apart. Push the oar, and the backbone felt it instantly. It's real-time feedback. Modern racers will pay a fortune to feel that kind of clean signal through a tiller, and when something cracked after months offshore, the joint system spread stress across frames and stringers, making repairs possible with hand tools and spare iron. You do not cross the Atlantic without designing for failure. Designing for failure also meant addressing the most obvious problem. If the hull flexes, how did they stop the ocean from pouring in between the planks? But hang on, you say. If the hull flexes, how did they keep the sea out? Answer: chemistry and textiles before chemistry had a name. Pine tar cooked in earthen kilns seeped deep into fibers, staying flexible in cold. Add animal fat for softness, beeswax for water resistance. Between planks they rammed in fiber, often wool teased into long strands, soaked in tar until it turned into a gummy gasket. That band of tarred wool moved with the lap seams instead of tearing. This isn't a myth. Dig sites have pulled up thousand-year-old caulking still visible. Next time you see a modern tube of marine sealant, remember someone once did the same job with fire, wool, and patience. Let's talk ore ports, because cutting holes in your walls is usually a bad plan. Vikings turned a liability into a system. Ports sat where human arms could work for hours, without shredding shoulders, height, and angle tuned to bodies, not just symmetry. The edges were reinforced with added wood and iron, so the opening didn't become a crack starter. When rowing stopped, plugs went in. Not wine corks-shaped bungs that seated tight against beveled rims, sealed with tar, fast to remove when the wind died and muscle had to take over. Bonus feature, in fair weather, those ports breathed the hull, letting damp air out without letting the Atlantic in. Smarter than it looks, and it looks smart. This combination of a sealed, flexible hull and a multi-purpose ore system gave the longship its legendary versatility, especially near shore. You want versatility? Watch what happens near shore. The longship slides toward a beach the way a modern boat would flinch from. No quay, no harbor, no problem. A shallow draft means you can run the bow right up the sand, drop a gang of warriors or crates of trade goods, then shove off before anyone organizes a polite welcome. Wide bottom, tough frames, and that elastic skin spread the load of grounding so nothing spikes and shatters. Bow and stern curl up sharply to climb over surf instead of digging in and face planting. If the water thins further or a river squeezes to a rocky throat, you can pull, paddle, or even drag the hull over rollers. Suddenly, the map looks smaller. Fine, the skeptics say, but do they actually move? Replicas answer that. Vessels built to excavated lines like the Sea Stallion, based on a big longship from Roskilde, have clocked roughly 12 knots under favoring wind, and could row at a steady jogging pace with a full crew. That number isn't a flex, it's survival math. Speed turns a weather window into a crossing. Speed means you beat the storm to the fjord instead of meeting it outside. Also, square sails were not dumb canvas blocks. Viking sails were cut with belly and could be reefed and trimmed. Woolen cloth, heavy with fat and resin, held shape and shed water. The mast sat in a serious step, and keelson braced by crossbeams, so the thrust of the sail flowed into the spine without wrenching joints apart. Sail, oars, keel, steering oar, 4 parts of one machine talking to each other. But how did all these interconnected parts, the flexible skin, the strong spine, the sail, and the steering, hold up when the ocean stopped playing nice? Here's a beat to breathe, then we go into the storm. Night 12. Wind howls from the southwest. The bow lifts, drops, then lifts again higher. In a rigid carvel hull, each slam tries to print a crack across the planks. In a clinker hull, the seams flex. Each lap takes a slice of the hit and passes the rest along. Rivets hold because they're clenched, not threaded. The keel curve lifts the bow to stop spear thrusts of green water. The steering oar grabs clean flow and keeps the nose to the waves. The tarred seams live. The plugs hold. The wool gaskets swell against pressure. The ship survives because every decision in the yard assumed this night would come. When dawn breaks, you're wet, miserable, alive. But there's more under the surface, literally. Weight distribution in these boats wasn't pile it anywhere. Crew, cargo, shields, spare oars, the heavy chest of ironwork, everything had its place to tune, trim, and roll behavior. Move a dozen men forward and you shift how the bow meets chop. Slide them aft and the stern gains bite for steering. Shipmasters learned that tuning by feel, the way a good driver knows when the back end is about to step out. That is data, Viking style. Different missions asked for different hulls. War longships were long, relatively narrow, and shallow, built to sprint, land, and leave. Trading Nar were shorter and tubbier, with more freeboard and deeper bellies to swallow cargo and ride ocean swells in safety. Both use the same family of tricks: lapstrake, strong keel, smart caulking, But the choices were tuned for job, not fashion. That's real engineering. Every line on the hull earns its keep. This practical engineering extended beyond the initial build. The ships were designed from the start to be maintained, repaired, and iterated upon.